The air in the grand ballroom was thick with the scent of polished wood, expensive perfume, and history. Crystal chandeliers rained light onto the assembled dignitaries, celebrities, and members of the royal family, all buzzing with the quiet energy of anticipation. It was a royal charity gala, one of the key dates on the social calendar, a night for the monarchy to showcase its soft power and connection to the arts. Yet, no one in the room knew they were about to witness a moment that would transcend the usual pomp and circumstance. In a quiet corner near the grand piano, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was taking her place, her sapphire gown shimmering like a captured piece of the night sky. The decision for her to participate had been a closely guarded secret, known only to a handful of people. As the lights began to dim and the orchestra fell into a hushed silence, a wave of confused murmurs swept through the crowd. Why was the princess sitting at the instrument? Was she simply to introduce the next performer? Then a figure walked onto the stage, violin in hand, the legendary maestro André Rieu. A moment later, another icon emerged from the shadows, Sir Elton John. The murmurs stopped. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. For Catherine, this performance was more than just a surprise cameo. It was a statement. And the past year had been one of the most challenging of her life, marked by a very public health battle. There had been whispers, rumors, and a seemingly endless cycle of speculation about her well-being. To many in that room, she was a figure of royal grace, but to those who knew the truth, her presence on that piano stool was a victory in itself. Her hands, which the newspapers loved to photograph for their elegance, rested on the keys. As Sir Elton John began to sing the first, and tender lines of Your Song, a song of devotion and simple love, Catherine began to play. The melody, carried by Rieu's soaring violin and Elton's soulful voice, was given a new, delicate foundation by the princess's accompaniment. It wasn't a technically flawless performance in the conservatory sense, but it was perfect in its emotional resonance. It was a gift. And as the music swelled, filling every corner of the vast room, and all eyes turned to the royal box where King Charles III sat with Queen Camilla. The king, a known lover of classical music and a man of deep feeling, was utterly still, his gaze fixed on his daughter-in-law. The performance built to its final, heartbreakingly beautiful crescendo. As the last note hung in the air, there was a second of absolute, profound silence. It was the kind of silence that is louder than any applause, and a collective intake of breath from hundreds of people who knew they had just witnessed something sacred. In that silence, Catherine lifted her hands from the keys and turned towards the royal box. The entire room, packed with the great and the good, was focused on her. But she was focused on him. With a poise that seemed to defy gravity, she performed a deep, slow, and immaculate curtsy directed solely at King Charles. It wasn't the quick, perfunctory dip often seen at official engagements, and it was a full, traditional gesture of profound respect. And in that singular moment, the silence was broken. Not by noise, but by the sight of the king. The usually reserved monarch, a man who had spent a lifetime learning to mask his emotions, was visibly moved. He wiped a tear from his eye. It was a fleeting, human gesture, but it was captured by the cameras and seared into the memory of everyone present. Catherine's graceful bow had not just followed protocol. It had, in a way, silenced the room and reached across the grandeur to touch her king's heart. To understand the full weight of that silent exchange at the piano, one had to rewind to a much stiffer, more formal scene that had played out earlier in the year. Months before the gala, the royal family had gathered on Horse Guards Parade, the grand ceremonial square in London, to welcome the French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife, Brigitte, for a state visit. The pageantry was immense. Polished boots, be gleaming medals and the clip-clop of horses drawing gilded carriages. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood alongside her husband, Prince William, a vision of impeccable style in a tailored Dior ensemble. The world's media were watching, their long lenses focused on every handshake, every smile, every nuanced interaction. On the surface, it was a textbook display of diplomatic soft power. But underneath the veneer of perfection, the human drama was unfolding, a moment of protocol that would become a viral sensation and offer a fascinating glimpse into the rigid hierarchies of royal life. President Macron and his wife arrived, greeting King Charles and Queen Camilla with the expected handshakes and, in a very French gesture, a kiss on the hand for the Queen and the Princess. It was a moment of continental flair amid British tradition. As the two heads of state engaged in animated conversation, Catherine and William respectfully hung back, waiting for their turn to greet the monarchs. This is where the protocol became a delicate dance. As the most senior members of the family, the king and queen must always be acknowledged with a bow or a curtsy, but only the first time they are seen that day. As the king was preoccupied, Catherine seized her moment and dipped into a graceful curtsy. The problem? The king and queen, engrossed in their conversation with the Macrons, didn't see it. So, and a moment later, she did it again. Still, their attention was elsewhere. Later, when the prince and princess finally stepped forward to speak with Charles and Camilla, Catherine was faced with a conundrum. Protocol demanded she curtsy, but she had already done so twice. To ensure the respect was properly received, she performed a third, quick little dip for the king, followed by a warm cheek kiss for Queen Camilla, and then, as if to bookend the entire interaction, a fourth and final curtsy. On social media, ever watchful, exploded. Clips of the four-time curtsy were played on a loop, with comments ranging from admiration for her dedication to protocol, to sympathy for her awkward position, to outright criticism. "Why is Catherine bouncing up and down at nothing?" one user quipped. Another called the scene so awkward, while a critic slammed the king and queen for their inattentiveness, suggesting it was they who should be bowing to her. And the moment laid bare the strange reality of royal life. A future queen, a woman of immense global popularity, was obliged to repeatedly dip into a subservient gesture just to get the attention of her in-laws. But for those who knew the inner workings of the family, the incident wasn't a sign of disrespect or a snub. It was simply the machinery of monarchy grinding into action. Royal expert Micah Mears explained the rigid rules, noting that while Catherine is a royal highness, she still curtsies to the current heads of state, a rule that exists to reinforce the line of succession and the hierarchy of the throne. It was a job, not a personal slight. This seemingly awkward incident on the global stage was, in reality, a powerful testament to Catherine's deep-seated commitment to her role and her respect for the institution. It was a commitment that was tested in the most profound way imaginable in the months that followed. The grace and patience she showed while repeatedly curtsying to an unseen monarch was a small-scale rehearsal for the grace and patience she would need to navigate a far more serious and personal crisis. The woman who would not let a breach in protocol ruffle her feathers was the same woman who would soon face a terrifying health scare with the same quiet dignity, a dignity that would ultimately bring her closer to the king in a way that no public duty ever could. And the year that followed the French state visit was one of profound silence and shadow for the Princess of Wales. The woman who had gracefully navigated a four-time curtsy, who had smiled through 1,000 public engagements, vanished from the public eye. The initial announcements were vague, citing a planned abdominal surgery. The palace, in its traditional way, asked for privacy, hoping to allow the princess to recover out of the relentless glare of the media. But the vacuum of information was quickly filled by a toxic storm of speculation, conspiracy theories, and outright lies that spread across the internet like wildfire. Catherine, The picture of health and royal composure was now the subject of cruel memes, wild guesses about her whereabouts, and a level of scrutiny that felt deeply invasive. Behind the closed doors of Adelaide Cottage, her home in Windsor, a very different reality was unfolding, one far more frightening than any tabloid could invent. In a brave and unprecedented video message, Catherine later revealed the truth. Tests after the surgery had found cancer. She had been forced to tell her 3 young children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, in a way that would give them hope, assuring them that she was getting stronger every day. The silence that had been so cruelly mocked was, in fact, and the silence of a family grappling with fear, a mother focusing on her health, and a wife supporting his own wife through the darkest of times. The world, which had been so quick to judge, was suddenly shamed into a hush. An outpouring of support flooded in from across the globe. But perhaps the most significant support came from within the very institution she had dedicated her life to serving. King Charles, himself undergoing treatment for an undisclosed form of cancer, was one of the first people Catherine and William informed before the video was released to the public. The bond between the princess and her father-in-law, already warm, was about to be forged in the fires of a shared ordeal. A royal source, speaking to People magazine, offered a rare glimpse behind the palace doors. It is clear that she and the king are quite close, in some respects closer to him than William, the insider revealed. This closeness, and perhaps born of a shared understanding of their role as spares to the direct line of succession, who then married into the core of the family, now deepened into a powerful, empathetic alliance. They became co-travelers on a difficult road. While the world saw the edited video messages and the carefully curated photographs, Charles and Catherine shared the real, unvarnished reality of treatment, the exhaustion, the fear, the small victories, and the setbacks. They understood each other's good days and bad days, physically and mentally, in a way that no one else in the family could. Their conversations, once filled with talk of royal projects and state papers, now included quieter exchanges about medication, fatigue, and the simple joy of feeling well enough to walk in the garden. This shared experience began to subtly shift the dynamics of the monarchy. The king, who had always been insistent that the show must go on, "I come hell or high water," became a vocal advocate for Catherine's need to prioritize her recovery over public duty. When she had to make last-minute decisions to pull out of events like the Royal Ascot, a friend of the king's explained to the Daily Beast that Charles was entirely understanding. Gone was the old royal stiffness that might have viewed such a cancellation as a lapse in duty. In its place was a deeply personal empathy. "He is going through cancer himself," the friend pointed out. And the king knew that the vague grounds for cancellation were, in reality, the brutal, unpredictable nature of illness. This mutual vulnerability created a new, unshakable trust between them. The public would soon see the fruits of this private bond in a moment of powerful symbolism that would speak louder than any press release. It was against this backdrop of private struggle that the idea for the Royal Charity Gala performance was born. For months, Catherine had been largely out of the public eye, her appearances few and carefully managed. The world was hungry to see her, but more than that, the institution of the monarchy needed a moment of unity, a powerful visual to remind the nation of its enduring strength. King Charles, ever the strategist, understood this implicitly, but he also understood something more personal. His daughter-in-law needed a way to re-enter the world on her own terms, or to reclaim her narrative from the clutches of illness and speculation. The gala, with its celebration of music and the arts, provided the perfect stage. The planning was a masterclass in royal secrecy, overseen with the king's blessing. The collaboration was a dream. Sir Elton John, a longtime family friend who had sung at Diana's funeral and was a confidant to William, André Rieu, the maestro of waltz and classical crossover, and Catherine at the piano. For Catherine, the choice of Your Song was deeply personal. It was a love letter, a simple declaration of feeling that resonated with her own journey. Learning to play it, practicing on the piano at home while managing the side effects of treatment, gave her a focus beyond hospitals and blood tests. It was a project of the soul. When she finally felt strong enough, the decision was made. The performance would go ahead unannounced, a surprise gift to the nation, and in a very real way, a personal gift from Catherine to her king. As she sat at the piano in her shimmering sapphire gown, the months of fear and speculation melted away. She was no longer the patient, the subject of headlines, or the victim of cruel rumors. She was simply Catherine, a wife, a mother, and now a performer. The music began, and the magic that the planners had hoped for filled the room. Sir Elton's voice, mature and full of emotion, wrapped around the melody. André Rieu's violin sang in harmony. And at the center of it all, Catherine's piano playing provided the heartbeat. It was a performance of exquisite vulnerability. The audience was captivated, but for one man in the royal box, it was more than captivation. It was a profound emotional experience. King Charles watched his daughter-in-law, a woman who had been through hell and back, not just surviving but thriving, creating beauty, and giving a gift to him and to the world. This was not the frail woman recovering from treatment, and this was the future of his family line, strong, graceful, and radiant. Then came the final note. As the music faded, Catherine rose from the piano. The room was completely silent, still under the spell of what they had just heard. All eyes were on her. And in that perfect suspended moment, she turned to face the king. She did not simply nod or smile. With the poise of a dancer and the sincerity of a daughter, she performed a deep, formal, and achingly beautiful curtsy. It was the same gesture she had performed 4 times on Horse Guards Parade, a gesture of protocol. But this was different. This was a gesture of pure, unadulterated love and respect. It was a silent thank you for his understanding, for his support, for standing with her family during the darkest days. It was a daughter-in-law honoring her king, but more importantly, a fellow warrior honoring her comrade. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sight of King Charles, his eyes glistening as he wiped away a tear. In that one, graceful movement, Catherine had silenced not just the room, but the months of noise, and had spoken directly to the heart of her king. The image of Catherine's curtsy and Charles's tear became an instant, iconic photograph. It was splashed across front pages and shared millions of times online, a symbol of hope, resilience, and family unity. But for the royal family, it was more than just a good photo opportunity. Thus, it was a public affirmation of a private reality that had been carefully curated for years, now brought to the surface by the crucible of illness. Body language experts had a field day, dissecting the micro-expressions. Judy James noted how Catherine's smile for the king was different, warmer, more reflective, a sign of a deep, empathetic connection. The moment was a far cry from the stiff formalities of the past. It was the new monarchy, one where genuine emotion was not just permitted, but was becoming its greatest strength. This newfound emotional transparency was also being passed down to the next generation. In the months that followed, behind-the-scenes footage from a BBC documentary about the king's coronation year offered another touching glimpse into this modern royal dynamic. The film showed the family rehearsing for the historic ceremony at Westminster Abbey. In one particularly charming clip, King Charles arrives to greet his son and grandchildren. He warmly embraces Prince William, then turns to Catherine, giving her a hug and a kiss. Without missing a beat, the princess dips into a quick, practiced curtsy. Then, the king turns to his youngest granddaughter, Princess Charlotte. The 8-year-old, having watched her mother, steps forward with the confidence of a future royal. She hugs her grandfather and then, mimicking Catherine with perfect precision, she performs her own little curtsy. It was a moment of pure, unscripted delight, showing how these traditions are not just dusty protocols, but living gestures learned in the warmth of family love. The contrast with the past was stark. The awkwardness of the 4-time curtsy at the state visit was now a distant memory, a footnote in a much larger story. That incident, once viewed as a potential embarrassment, could now be seen as a testament to Catherine's unwavering commitment to the institution, even when the institution wasn't looking. She followed the rules not for show, but out of genuine respect. That same respect, now amplified by shared hardship, had blossomed into a powerful alliance. King Charles, a man who had waited his entire life to become monarch, found in Catherine not just a diligent worker, but a kindred spirit. Royal insiders began to speak of her influence in glowing terms. She knows the important role the family plays in building relationships globally on behalf of the UK, one source told People, and adding that her work at the annual Diplomatic Corps reception, glittering in the historic Lover's Knot tiara, showed she was really at home in her role as a senior royal. The Princess of Wales was no longer just William's wife. She was a pillar of the monarchy in her own right, with a direct and powerful line to the king. As the months passed and the health of both the king and the princess continued to improve, but the royal family began to present a united front that felt more authentic than any carefully staged photo call in recent memory. The gala performance had been a turning point, a moment where the personal and the public collided to create something genuinely moving. It signaled a new era for the House of Windsor, one where vulnerability was no longer a weakness to be hidden, but a strength to be shared. And the image of Catherine's graceful bow and the king's tearful response became a shorthand for this new approach. A monarchy that could still command respect, but that could also, in the right moment, touch the human heart. This new dynamic was on full display at events like the VE Day 80th anniversary concert. As King Charles delivered a poignant speech echoing his grandfather George VI's address from 1945, the cameras caught Catherine watching him with an expression of unmistakable warmth. A body language expert, Judy James, observed that her smile transformed into a warm, reflective expression. Her cheeks rounded, and her clasped hands conveyed a mix of warmth and sadness. She wasn't just a royal in attendance, she was a daughter-in-law, proud and supportive. And when William, standing beside her, affectionately placed his arm on her back, it was a quiet reminder of the core family unit that was now the monarchy's greatest asset. And the ghosts of past scandals and family rifts seemed to fade in the glow of this quiet, mutual support. Looking ahead, the bond between Catherine and Charles is seen by many royal watchers as the bedrock of the monarchy's future stability. William, the direct heir, will one day be king. But his wife's relationship with his father ensures a continuity and a harmony that will smooth that transition when it eventually comes. Catherine has learned the ropes not just from the institution, but from the man himself. She has earned his trust not through flattery but through her actions, her dignified curtsy in the face of protocol, her brave fight against illness, and her deeply personal gift of music. The woman who once had to bounce up and down to be acknowledged by her king is now one of the people he relies on most. The tear he wiped away at the gala was not just for the beauty of the music. It was a tear of gratitude for a daughter he never had, a partner in the grand project of the monarchy, and a living promise that the crown was in safe, graceful hands for generations to come. The room had been silenced, the moment was captured, and the future of the royal family had never looked more secure.